Carl, a hopeless romantic, bumps into a girl by the name of Ninny. He thinks it's love at first sight, so he searches for her. The story begins with Carl, who is questioning his brother and his girlfriend, Lena. He is testing out a new quiz as he works for a quiz company. He gets a phone call from his boss and rushes to get to work. He asks his brother for his shirt, but he asks him to move out. His brother wants to make things serious with his girlfriend, but Carl calls her a casual Tinder hookup. He leaves upset and in a hurry, and he forgets his keys and phone. He shamefully knocks on the door, and his brother's girlfriend hands him his stuff. He goes to a food stand to get lunch and notices a beautiful girl in front of him. She asks him what kind of sausage he could eat forever, and he says the Vienna sausage. She orders one for him and gets a curry sausage for herself. They eat together, and Carl finds out that her name is Ninny and that she is from Vienna. He tells her that his favorite movie is from Vienna, and she guesses it immediately. Before Sunrise is a movie Ninny knows as well. Carl gets a call from his boss, but chooses to ignore it, and asks Ninny to show her around before she catches the bus to Vienna. As they're walking, Carl sees his boss, and pushes Ninny inside the store. They end up in a wedding store, and the lady working there asks them whether they need something. Carl tells Ninny that he has to hide from his boss, and she tells the lady that they have an appointment. The lady takes them in, and Ninny tries on a wedding dress, while Carl tries the wedding cake flavors. He offers her a bite, and she says that she only eats the original Sachertorte from the Café Sacher in Vienna. She mentions her and her dad's tradition for her birthday. Every year, they meet at 3 p.m. on her birthday at the Café Sacher and have Sachertorte. The lady goes to search for their tagline, and while Ninny and Carl enjoy the cakes, the real couple that had a reservation walks in. Carl realizes that they're in trouble, and they run out of the store and manage to catch the bus. He asks for her number before she goes, and she gives it to him and tells him to save it. His phone rings before he gets the chance, but he has to answer the call as his boss is calling. He asks him why he didn't come to the meeting, and Carl says that he will be there the next day. He sees that there's no number in his phone and panics. He calls his brother to ask whether the number had saved itself. When his brother asks his girlfriend, she says that the number is gone. Carl heads to the bus station and asks for the bus going to Vienna. He asks the lady to contact the bus, as the love of his life could be on it. After some thinking, she gives in and calls the bus. She asks for the name of the girl, and Carl has a hard time remembering it. He asks the lady to say that Mr. Before Sunrise is asking for Ms. Sachertorte. The steward does as he's told, but Ninny has her headphones on and doesn't hear the announcement. Carl waits for some feedback, but some hours pass, and he gets none. He gets back home disappointed, but his brother's girlfriend Lena tells him that he could catch a flight and be in Vienna just in time for the bus. Carl goes to the bus station. Once he arrives in Vienna, he sees Ninny and runs to her. He ends up tangling himself on a dog leash and falls to the ground. By the time he frees himself, it's too late. Ninny had already left. His boss calls him again, and Carl takes a flight back home immediately. Carl gets to work tired and unmotivated. His boss pressures him to make a better quiz and proceeds to read something about Sachertorte. Carl remembers what Ninny had told her about her birthday tradition and gets an idea. He calls his boss for a private talk and asks him to go work in Vienna. That way, he'll find the girl and be doing research as well. He goes home to pack and tells his brother about it. He plans on going to Café Sacher every day until he finds Ninny for her birthday. His brother thinks that the idea is absurd, but Lena thinks it's romantic. Carl arrives at the cafe and goes straight inside. A man stops him and asks him where he's going. Carl says that he wants Sachertorte and a cup of coffee. The man tells him that he isn't the only one and orders him to go back in line if he doesn't have a reservation. A lady by the name of Franziska happens to walk by when Carl is asking for a table, and the waiter, Schwartz, tells her that he doesn't have a table. She invites Carl to sit with her, and he does. She orders her usual, and Carl orders Sachertorte and a cappuccino. The old lady tells him that quality people used to come to the cafe, but only tourists visit lately. She asks him whether it's his first time coming there, and he says it's his first time trying real Sachertorte. She tells him that the first time is immaculate, and that he should enjoy it. He tries it and calls it yummy. The old lady looks at him in disappointment and says that the cake is not just yummy, but it is like a dream. Carl smiles and agrees that the cake tastes like a dream. After realizing that he won't see Ninny that day, Carl asks the waitress, Zora, for a reservation, and she tells him to ask Schwartz. He tells her that he doesn't seem to like him, and Zora promises to sneak his reservation in. He goes to the building he would be staying in and looks for the guy he had communicated with. He sits in a room with two funny-looking guys, and they stare at him without saying anything. He starts to feel uncomfortable, so he asks whether they're waiting for someone. They say that they're waiting for Udo, who comes in soon. He is disappointed as he thought he had spoken to a woman. He says that they need a woman, as they are 3 men already, but his roommate says that they should test Carl. They test him on how he could meet a woman. Carl doesn't know what to say and tells the truth about waiting for Ninny. The guys think that Carl is a cool dude, and they welcome him to their apartment. Udo introduces the third roommate, Raoul. Carl tries to get work done at night, but he doesn't seem to have any internet. Yuto tells him that only 3 people could connect to the Wi-Fi, so there's no luck for him. Carl heads to the local library, but it seems that he has no luck, because there's no internet there either. He gathers a lot of books and does his research all night. The next morning comes, and he heads to another cafe to get work done. Before he has to go to the Sasher, a little girl comes into the cafe and steals a macaroon. The waitress comes running after her, but she's in no luck as the girl runs away. Once the waitress comes back in, Carl realizes that she is the girl he had bumped into at the bus station. Her dog had stopped him from getting to Ninny. The girl realizes that her croissants have burned and rushes to take them out of the oven. Carl looks at her and tells her that her croissants burning is poetic justice for making him miss the love of his life. The girl laughs and closes his laptop, saying that he's not welcome to come to her cafe anymore. Carl gets to the Cafe Sasher, and Schwartz tries to stop him, but Zora tells him that she had taken his reservation. Carl sits and orders the same thing he did the previous day. He enjoys his cake, but a proposal catches his attention. He watches the man propose to his lover and wishes to be him, as tears fill his eyes. He goes back home, and one of his roommates, hers, asks him whether Ninny had showed up. He tells him no, but his chances of meeting her are increasing each day. He gets a text message from his boss, who asks for the assignment to be done by morning. He goes into his room to work. He can't submit his work because of the Wi-Fi, so he heads to the girls' cafe. He sees that it's closed, but that doesn't stop him, and he sits at the front door to work. He ends up falling asleep, and the girl wakes him up in the morning. She lets him in and lets him use her internet. He promises to finish work and be out of there as soon as possible. She turns on some music as she prepares the cupcakes for the day. Carl finishes his work, and the girl hands him a cup of coffee. Another man walks into the cafe, and the girl tells him that he is late. He is the girl's ex-boyfriend, and he has come to take the dog. They share custody after the breakup. The guy leaves, and the girl apologizes for his weird behavior. Carl had mentioned that he goes to Sasher every day, and the girl doesn't believe him. As he starts explaining, she remembers the croissants in the oven and runs to get them. Carl takes one to go. Before he leaves, he introduces himself to her and finds out that her name is Miriam. He goes to the Sasher, and Zora tells him that she recognizes his look. She knows that he is waiting for someone. She tells him that she has a good feeling and thinks that the girl will come that day. Carl spends his next days at the Cafe Sasher, hopeful that he will find Ninny. The staff gets used to him and makes sure to remind him that she will come the following day. He works in Miriam's cafe before his alarm sets off to go to Sasher. Miriam's coworker doesn't believe that he is going to Sasher to find the girl, as there are many other ways he can meet her. Miriam decides to take matters into her own hands and goes to the Sasher to check whether Carl is there. He sees her and tells her that she has to leave if the girl does show up. She asks him what Ninny looks like, and he calls her pretty. Miriam realizes that he doesn't know anything about her, and Carl tries to justify himself by saying that he thinks of her as a feeling. They leave the cafe, and Miriam tells him that she wants to help him, as she feels responsible for him missing her at the bus station. The next day, they walk around town and get to know each other. Miriam is shocked to find out that Carl makes quizzes for a living. She questions his knowledge, and he seems to get everything right. They talk about love, and Miriam says that she wants to see her partner as he is, and not as someone he's trying to be. As time passes, Carl goes about his life based on his routine. He does find himself more interested in Miriam, and she finds herself interested in him as well, but they don't make anything of it. Everyone supports Carl and encourages him not to lose hope, as he sits in the cafe, having the same thing every day. As time passes, Carl and Miriam get closer and closer. She meets his friends and gets to know him as a person. They get comfortable with each other and become really good friends. One day, as Carl's working in the library, Miriam visits him and takes him out for lunch. She tells him that she has a new mission in mind, as she takes pictures of him. She tells him that he has to make a social media profile. That way, it would be easier for him to find Ninny. Carl says that if he were to make one, it should be called Mr. Before Sunrise Seeks Miss Sashertort. He tells Miriam that Before Sunrise is his favorite movie, but Miriam doesn't know it. He tells her that it is a story of 2 people falling in love, and she laughs at the fact that a classic romantic movie is his favorite. Miriam says that love isn't a fairy tale. It's complicated, and that's what makes it beautiful. He asks about their next location, and she offers to go outside the city, but he says that he doesn't want to take the risk. They go on a Ferris wheel and look at beautiful Vienna. Carl admits that he's starting to get scared about seeing Ninny. He wants to tell her the truth when he sees her, but Miriam tells him that he should be spontaneous. She tells him to pretend that she is Ninny, and it is his first time seeing her. Carl agrees and proceeds to tell everything the way it happened. His words touch Miriam, who is left speechless. His alarm clock rings, and their moment gets interrupted. Miriam asks for his number so she can send him the pictures, but Carl tells her that he doesn't want to be on social media. More time passes, and Christmas comes. Carl helps Miriam in the bakery, and they make delicious festive cookies. Things are going great for Schwartz and Franziska, as their bond seems to be getting stronger. While working in the library one day, Miriam tells Carl that she is a big fan of opera, especially Callas and Tosca. After that, Carl goes to Cafe Sasher, as usual. He sees a big line, so he decides to get in through the hotel. He sees Schwartz and Franziska decorating the tree. Carl gets inside the cafe, and Zora brings him the usual. She tells him that what he's doing is great, and that the world needs more romantics. After she leaves, a man approaches his table. His name is George, and he is the director of the hotel. He thanks Carl for coming to the cafe for the last 100 days, and gives him an envelope with a voucher. He can stay at the Sasher Hotel for a night, once he finds the girl. Carl thanks him, and they take some pictures of him holding the voucher with the director of the hotel. He comes back to the cafe, and Franziska joins him. She tells him the trick of love is not to miss it once it comes to you. Carl smiles and tells her that he will remember that. Franziska takes him to her room to show him pictures of her late husband. She says that he had been her best friend before he became the love of her life. He had been a conductor at the Vienna Opera, and she had watched all of his performances. Carl says that he hasn't been to opera before, and Franziska tells him that she will get him a ticket for Tosca the following night. He asks for 2 tickets. He wants to take Miriam because she loves opera. Carl gets a call from his brother, who asks him to come back home because he can't miss Christmas. His brother hangs up the call after saying that he'll come to Vienna to get Carl. Carl goes to Miriam's cafe the next morning. He tells her he wants to thank her for everything by taking her to the opera. She is taken aback, but accepts his offer. The day of the opera comes, and Carl, dressed inappropriately for the opera, goes to the Sasher. Franziska tells him to come to her room, where she gives him a beautiful tuxedo. He asks her why she lives there, and she says that she never liked cooking or cleaning. She has made the best memories of her life in that hotel, and loves being there. Schwartz comes in, and Franziska asks him for some appropriate shoes for Carl. He ends up being the same shoe size as Carl, so Franziska makes them swap shoes. Carl gets to the opera, and waits for Miriam at the stairs. She comes up behind him, and he is taken aback by her beauty. He compliments her before getting into the hall. Tosca begins, and Carl can't seem to hold his tears. Miriam looks at him and hands him a napkin, as she understands his sudden emotion. The opera ends, and Miriam says that it had been beautiful and sad. Carl says that he would have loved a happier ending. Miriam says that it's made in Vienna's style, which always ends on a sad note. She asks him whether he's hungry. He is, so she takes him to a sausage stand. He orders 2 cheese sausages, some bread, mustard, and 2 beers. After finishing the food, Carl asks her to tell him about her dreams, because it seems like all they talk about are his. Miriam's wish is to ice skate in Central Park with the man she loves. A more realistic wish would be 2 armchairs for the cafe she fell in love with. She needs someone to come and pick them up with her, and Carl offers to help, as long as he's at the Sasher by 3 p.m. He sees that Miriam is cold and goes to put his jacket on her. He gets close to her. For a moment, they get lost in each other's eyes and almost kiss. Carl breaks the tension, and both of them head home. They come back for each other as they realize there's more than friendship between them. Miriam comes before Carl and leaves shortly, thinking that he didn't feel the same for her. When he comes shortly after, he doesn't see her and thinks the same. He gets home, and different thoughts fill his mind. Miriam does the same as she looks through the pictures of Carl on her phone. The day before the trip, Miriam's coworker tells Miriam that Carl doesn't like her, since he is waiting for the Sasher girl to show up. The morning of the trip comes, and it seems to be going great. Miriam and Carl ride on the snowy road and sing songs, which make the trip even better. Carl asks Miriam to stop the car at one point, because he has to go to the bathroom. As he does so, he gets hit with a snowball. He pulls his pants up quickly and proceeds to start a snowball fight with Miriam. Miriam ends up falling on top of him, and they have a moment once again. But it's interrupted by Carl's alarm. They get into the car, but the car doesn't want to start. Carl offers to help, but she says that it has happened before because the car is old. She ends up calling a pickup truck, which will be there in 2 hours. That upsets Carl very much, and he starts screaming at Miriam because he would miss his daily visit to Sasher. He calls her car a piece of junk and her idea stupid. Hanging out with her is a waste of time. Miriam gets upset, but says nothing of it. A car appears on the road, and she stops it. She asks the man whether he was going to Vienna, and he says no, but she pays him to take Carl there. Carl gets to the cafe in time and orders an apple strudel for a change. The waiter brings him Sashertort and says that they're out of apple strudel for the day. Schwartz comes and asks whether he'll have a cappuccino, and Carl tells him he'll only have the cake. When Zora comes to him and asks him whether he wants an espresso, he takes all of his anger out on her. He starts yelling and says that he'll go crazy if someone tells him that the girl will come the following day again. Everyone goes quiet, and Zora leaves him be. Carl's brother comes to his table, and Carl is relieved to see him. He admits that he is worried about him and reminds him of the time he had pushed him to walk, even though he knew it was impossible. Carl asks him whether he wants him to give up his dream, but his brother tells him he is sure that his dream isn't yelling at Steph. Carl admits that he is confused about what to do. His brother tells him that if he's sure that she's the love of his life, he should stay, but if not, he should come home. Miriam posts a photo on Carl's account in hopes of finding the girl. She gets a text from her friend, inviting her to the club that evening, and Miriam says yes. Carl and his roommates, along with his brother and Lena, are at a party. Carl sees his brother talking to a girl at the bar. He approaches them and sees that his brother is talking to Miriam. Her friend comes and takes her to the dance floor, but Carl stops her and tries to apologize. She doesn't want to hear it and leaves with her friend. Carl's roommate comes to him and asks about Miriam. Carl says that they're just friends, and he takes the chance to speak to her. This doesn't sit well with Carl, and he goes to talk to Miriam. She pulls him away from the dance floor and tells him to leave her alone. He says that he wants to apologize, and she tells him that it isn't necessary. She's tired of waiting and hoping, and doesn't want to do it anymore. He tries to stop her, but she disappears into the crowd. He leaves and takes a walk home to clear his mind. He stumbles across Sora, and she asks him what he's doing out so early. He apologizes for yelling at her the other day, and she tells him that they all have bad days. She notices that he isn't feeling so well, so she takes him to the kitchen of the cafe to cheer him up. They see the bakers preparing the Sachertorte, and the process looks very satisfying. Zora says that she watches them prepare the cakes every time she feels sad. She thanks Carl for inspiring her and says that she will quit working to focus on her dream, which is traveling. The next morning comes, and Carl wakes up to some interesting news. He sees himself in the daily paper, and his brother makes fun of him and says that he might finally find the girl. Lena asks about Miriam, and they all joke around and say that a battle will be happening between the girls. Miriam's work is interrupted by a text from Nini. She pretends that she is Carl and tells her to meet him at the Sacher Cafe at 3 p.m. Carl gets to Miriam's cafe, ready to tell her that he loves her, but is interrupted by his roommate parking on the side of the store. Miriam tells him that she is here to deliver the cookies. He tells her that they have to talk, and she says they will in the van, as she will take him to the Sacher. His roommate makes Miriam angry as he reads the newspaper and the sweet words Carl has said about her. They arrive at the cafe, and Carl asks for her number so they can talk later. She gives it to him and drives off quickly. Carl gets inside the cafe, and before he tells them that he won't be coming again, he hears his voice being called out. He turns and sees Nini waiting for him at the table. He can't believe his eyes as he goes to greet her. They hug, and she asks whether he had waited for her for 100 days, and he says yes. She calls it very romantic and crazy, and Carl tells her that the craziest thing is that today was supposed to be his last. He says that he didn't know that she would come that day, but Nini shows him the Instagram messages. He realizes that Miriam had done that, and he sits down to explain the situation to Nini. He says that everything that has happened has changed his life. He says that she is the reason he had met and fallen in love with Miriam. Nini asks whether he's in love with her, and he says no. She looks relieved, as if she won't have to break his heart. She admits that him not calling has made her fall in love as well. Her boyfriend waves at her through the window, and Nini admits that he had shown her the new paper. Nini says that she had come to see him because her birthday is more than 6 months away, and she didn't want to keep him waiting. They say goodbye to each other, and Carl goes to call Miriam. But he sees that she had put zeros as her number. He runs to the cafe and sees her coworker there. He asks for Miriam and her number, but her coworker doesn't want to give it to him. He tries to leave his number, but she stops him and says that he has missed his chance. Defeated, he leaves the store and heads home. The group bets on who Carl will end up with and gets very quiet once he gets home. He turns to them and asks them what they're looking at. All of them start asking questions, but Carl shuts them up. He says that he had met up with Nini, but he is in love with Miriam. He can't be with her because she hates him. His brother suggests that they go home the next day. Carl goes back to the Sacher and gives Schwartz his shoes back. Carl asks him what he's doing the same night, and he tells him that he will be at the Café Bronnerhof. Carl goes to Franziska to return the suit, and she tells him that she wants him to have it. Carl asks her whether she remembers her own words, and she does, so he tells her not to make the same mistake he did, and go to the Bronnerhof to meet Schwartz. He tells her that he is going home that same night, without Miriam as his girlfriend. Franziska laughs and tells him he should fight for the girl he loves. Carl goes home to pack, but changes his mind once he sees the tickets to the opera they had gone to with Miriam. Franziska and Schwartz's love blossoms when she shows up to their date. She admits that Carl's words had changed her mind. Carl rushes to the ice skate ring and sees Miriam selling cookies in the middle of it. He can't ice skate, so he goes to the radio and asks the man whether he can make an announcement. He announces a Christmas quiz and says the first question, what name means a woman who is loved? He reveals that the woman's name is Miriam. He exits the radio and heads for Miriam's stand. She notices him and watches carefully as he skates to her. He apologizes for taking so long to realize that he is in love with her. He admits that his dream was to find love, but he almost missed it. Tears start filling his eyes as Miriam asks him whether the 100 days he spent with her meant anything to him. He says that he could eat 100 more cakes for her and goes on about how he would do anything just to spend a day with her. He asks for a chance, but Miriam shuts him up by kissing him. They end up using the voucher for the Hotel Sacher. They kiss as the doorman closes their door, and their laughter echoes throughout the halls of the hotel.